Right, diversity in children's services is our next session, okay? Now, what we're going to look at theory, law, policy, ethics, and practice. Right. Now, key terms. Now, like I said earlier, it is important that you define your key terms in your essay. It's good practice. If you don't define your key terms, someone else is going to define them for you. The only problem is, if you allow that to happen, the definition that someone is going to come up with may be different to your own working definitions. It's always good practice in an academic piece to remember that key terms ought to be defined. Where and when you define it depends on your writing style and preference, but you must still need to define your key terms and tell your reader what your operational definition of those key terms is. Right, this is what we're intending to cover. We have a key term and theoretical perspectives on diversity, diversity in the law, diversity in policy, ethical perspective on diversity, and diversity in practice. All right. Now, diversity and difference. What is it? What does it mean? What is diversity?
It's diversity is kind of accommodating differences, and differences are things that are obviously not the same between people or things.
Okay. Excellent. Well done. Any other description of
Understanding everyone is unique.
understanding everyone is unique? Accommodating, understanding, right? What else? So we have accommodating, understanding, what else do we have? Yeah. Appreciating, right? Appreciating, accommodating, understanding. So you're appreciating, you're accommodating differences or uniquenesses and so on. Is that a hand up?
Oh no, it's literally
Right. Now, who is it about? When you talk about diversity, who is it about? In the context of our sector, who is it about? Children, right? So all you're considering there, when you talk about children in the sector, you are saying the children, who else?
The stakeholders.
Other stakeholders, for example?
Families, practitioners, communities.
Yep. I've seen in a lot of assignments, people just write practitioners rather than practitioners because the other TI is missing. Okay, use spell check. All right. So who is it about? Who is it for? I think it's the same thing here. 2 and 3 address the same stakeholders. Why does it matter? Why is diversity and difference? Why should we care about diversity and difference?
It's ethical, but it's also best practice.
Ethical best practice. Do you want to expand?
Within the sector that we're in, we are a caring sector. So I believe as a practitioner that it is best practice to celebrate diversity and also be inclusive. And inclusive doesn't necessarily mean a one for all, a universal stance. it means celebrating everyone's difference and uniqueness and trying to perhaps differentiate and help people understand those different aspects of perhaps culture or maybe
Yeah.
disability.
Excellent.
Could be intelligences, depends on how you look at it.
Well done. That's brilliant. Right. So what is the difference between diversity and difference? Or is there any difference?
Diversity perhaps is more positive. Difference you could, not necessarily, but difference you could perhaps look at it from a negative aspect. Difference may not necessarily be celebrated like diversity is in our politically correct society.
Okay. So what's politically correct? Is political correctness politically correct? Is that the way to go about things? No.
Could
Okay.
difference not be more like a pinpoint kind of thing? Like hair colour. It's different, it's not diverse. It's just different.
Okay. That's a good take on it. That's interesting.
That's it.
So difference is broader.
Yeah.
Diversity probably is more specific, is narrow. It looks at specific attributes maybe.
Like religion and stuff, that's
Exactly.
obviously diverse.
Yeah.
Whereas hair colour, eye colour, that's definitely different
Yeah.
because even some people might have the same eye colour, but it's definitely a difference rather than a
Diversity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Katie. Right. Okay, let's look at some theories here. Okay? Theoretical perspectives on diversity and difference. Okay. Okay, to move on to the next slide. Right. Now, when you consider diversity and difference, probably the first port of call or the first focal point should be identity. Right? Who are you? Right? What exactly does it mean? When we say your identity, what are we talking about? What is an identity?
What makes you you?
What makes you you? And what is it that makes you you?
Your attributes.
What are those attributes?
Could be physical ones, it could be your personality,
Okay, let's start with the physical ones then.
your size, your height, your hair colour,
Eye colour.
Okay,
what language you speak,
alright.
loads of different.
Loads of attributes. Now, which identity matters ahead of the others? Which one? To you personally, which identity do you think matters most? But remember, we have multiple identities, don't we? Right? You have your identity as a student. That's probably your primary identity here. Although I may argue that your identity as a human being is more important than your identity as a student. Right? Okay, so you have your identity as a student, but at the same time, when you leave this place, if you're going to drive a car, you assume a different identity. You are now a driver. Now, as a student here, the identity you assume once you get into the premises of this institution, once you get into this classroom, that identity subconsciously dictates to you how to behave, how to talk, and maybe how to pay attention. All right? There's a certain way, we talked about abstraction earlier on. In an abstract world, you're thinking, okay, in an ideal student is likely to behave this way. A reasonable student is likely to be sitting down. A reasonable student is likely to be taking notes. A reasonable student is likely to have notepads, right? So you have done everything that helps you fulfill that particular identity, because an identity comes with certain dictates, it comes with certain expectations, right? It comes with certain constraints as well. Probably there are certain things you want to do, but you are thinking, oh, I wouldn't do that necessarily because I am a student. It's that identity which is dictating to you how to behave according to your conceptualization of what other people expect of you. Okay? You leave this place, you get into your car, you assume a different identity, you're a driver. Even your psyche becomes that a driver's psyche, right? Where you're sitting right now in this classroom, you will not engage in road rage because this is not the place for you to engage in road rage. You won't be swearing at other drivers because it's not the place and time. But once you get into that car, suddenly a different you takes control. It's that driver mentality takes control, right? And you begin to think like a driver. You begin to act like a driver. What are you doing there? You are putting yourself under the spell of that identity of a driver. Okay? You conceptualize within your head what a reasonable driver would do in certain circumstances. And then you get home. Some of you assume the role of a mother. You're not going to behave the same way as you would as a student. As a mother, you think, okay, what should a mother do? What can a reasonable mother, what does an average mother do in these circumstances? Suddenly, the identity of a mother takes over and you begin to act accordingly, right? At the same time, you're a woman. That's another identity. At the same time, you're a sister, you're someone's sister. That's another identity. Every identity comes with it certain expectations, certain behaviors, certain dictates. But sometimes those identities may actually cause tension between each other. There may be tension between each other. For example, you're a student, you have an assignment due, you're writing your assignment, and suddenly your child is crying, right? So that child is not crying for attention from a student. The child is crying for attention from a mother. You leave what you have to attend to the child. So the mother identity has overridden the student identity, depending on what your priority is. But if your assignment is due tomorrow, you may actually say to the child, shut up, I'm doing my assignment. That's the student shouting at the mother. There is tension there between the mother and the student. Now, when it comes to identity, which identity matters most? Why is it that when people make fun of your identity as a driver, you may not take offense. If someone calls you a rubbish driver, you may actually laugh it off and move on. Yet, if someone makes fun of your race, why are people so enraged? Why is it race is more important than being a driver? Both are identities. Do we have hierarchies in identities in order of most important to the least important identity? All these multiple identities define who you are. You are not who you are just because of one identity. You are who you are because of the sum total of those identities, which are sometimes at war with each other. But why is it certain identities may cause offense if people make fun of them? Why is racism such an issue? Whereas sexism, at least against men, right? We heard people say, okay, if it is against women, it's sexism. If it is against men, it is banter. Oh, men are terrible. No one takes offense, right? Men can't eat. Men can't drive. No, men can't eat properly. Men can't do this. Men can't keep their places in order. No one takes offense. It's hardly mentioned as sexism, right? Say something against women in a similar fashion, in a stereotypical fashion, it becomes sexism, right? Same applies when you talk about race. You say something against white people, it's hardly mentioned, it's not racism. But if it is against blacks, it is racism. Why? Why do certain identities matter more than others? What do you think? And to you, what identity is more important? What do you think?
My own identity.
Which one?
Dunno.
Sister.
Could be any of them, depends what day it is,
Okay.
what situation I'm in.
All right. Okay, let's go into our settings. Which identities do you think matter more than others?
I think like the humanity identity is the one that matters most because that's the foundation to everything else.
Okay.
Because if you're a calm person and you're more than likely a calm driver, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And right, because what I'm trying to drive at here,
Yeah.
right? Equality Act 20. Is it 2010? Right. There's a list of protected characteristics. Okay? I want you to quickly do your research. 1 minute. What are those protected characteristics? Are we done with this? Okay. I just want you to tell me the protected characteristics.
So we've got
What are they?
Age,
Right, all of. Let's try now. Right, okay, let me write over here. Right, protected characteristics according to the Equality Act 2010. Okay, what is it?
age,
Age,
disability,
disability, yeah.
gender reassignment,
Gender reassignment,
marriage and civil partnership,
yep.
pregnancy and maternity,
Yep.
race,
Uh-huh.
religion or belief,
Religion,
yeah, or belief,
belief,
sex,
yep.
and then sexual orientation,
Okay, 9, right?
sexual,
Yeah. We have 9 protected characteristics under the Equality Act 2010. But are they the only distinguishing aspects of who we are? Why are these more important than others? Because here the Equality Act 2010 is suggesting that some identities matter more than others. Do you agree with that?
yeah, because they're the ones that people pinpoint most and can create discrimination against lives.
So it is unlawful if you discriminate against a person based on any of those. Are we suggesting that it is lawful to discriminate against other attributes?
Oh no, it's unlawful to do it against them all, but they're the ones that stand out the most.
So why have they been specified?
Those are the ones that make you, you, how other people perceive you.
Yeah.
So, your age, disability, gender, marriage, pregnancy. Those are the ones that other people, how other people see see you as a person,
Yeah.
and then the other things make up your personality more than anything.
That's a good attempt. Yeah. But I mean, every distinguishing attribute makes you you.
They're more vulnerable characteristics.
Okay, so those are more vulnerable characteristics. Okay, yeah, it's reasonable to say that. Are we saying that the rest are kind of lightweight?
No, they're just ones that sort of society has made vulnerable, so that has to be put in place to protect them.
Okay.
They're what make us different from each other.
A policy is not made by them characteristics like age, and I'm not googling this. I've just come across
It's
policy.
okay.
And, like age, because obviously, when you're an adult, it says when you're an adult, and like differentiates between a child and an adult. Disability, there's a lot of policies on disability, and stuff like that. So are they not? That's really bad, isn't it?
No, it makes sense what you say. It does make sense. But can you see how diversity, equality and diversity is such a very complex topic? It is not as straightforward as it appears. On paper, it appears sensible, it appears straightforward. But when it comes into practice, it's probably more complicated than it appears. All right? So the question, why do some identities matter more than others? I will go with what you've said. For example, some identities make others more vulnerable than others. Okay? Right. So, like I said, there are multiple identities. Some identities do complement each other, and others do contradict each other. I've just given you examples of where identities can actually contradict. And then you have distinguishing identities, which make you who you are, right? For example, all of you are female, right? So female does not distinguish anyone because you're all like in this group. That applies to everyone. So you want to look at, okay, what is it that distinguishes you from the rest? So they are what are known as distinguishing identities, right? And then we have identity hierarchies. Like we said, there are certain identities which matter more than others, right? And as practitioners, you ought to be sensitive to those identities when you are dealing with children, when you are dealing with families, when you are dealing with communities. You need to know that certain identities are actually more sensitive than others, okay? Probably my identity as a brother is not exactly a sensitive identity, all right? But other identities, for example, people's religion may be sensitive identities. And what it means to be a practitioner is being able to understand what it is that matters to children you work with, what it is that matters to families that you work with, so that you are able to deal with this issue of diversity, equality and diversity in an appropriate way. And then you have what are called tainted identities, okay? If you steal and you get a criminal record, you assume an identity of a thief, right? That identity is tainted because it carries with it certain stereotypes, certain negative connotations, right? No one wants to be called thief. Even thieves do not want to be called thieves. Why? Because that identity is tainted, i.e. it's not a clean identity, it's an impure identity. Same applies to demeaning identities, identities which make you feel less human than you actually are, right? All this is important for practitioners to understand because that helps you to work effectively and sensitively within the context of your job. Now, when it comes to children, okay, how do they develop a sense of self, a sense of who they are? What is it that we do with children? that helps them develop a sense of self. Remember we talked about a unique child, EYFS.
We facilitate what's important to them, perhaps their own journey of self-discovery, what they like, what they dislike, where perhaps they like to be in order to help them achieve their best outcomes.
Yeah. So facilitating, what exactly are we doing by facilitating? Can you give some specific examples of what it is that we are doing in facilitation?
Well, say in a nursery, you'd set up different areas within the nursery for the child to go to, and surely they would decide whether they liked that area or not, and that's their likes and dislikes.
Okay. So, do you think that will help them develop a sense of self, a sense of who they are?
Well, going back to what Laura said, it's all about, the quotes that we were looking at, and she said about creating like the same, like maybe in the EYFS allowing them to create their own identity, but then going into the national curriculum, we're saying to them, right, you have to sit down and do maths and English, and you need to do it this way. Are we not creating little robots of the same type of people? They're not being allowed to express their own
So,
identity.
how can we counter that? How can we reverse that?
Playtime, dinner time, they get
Okay.
to go and do what they want to do.
So they can be who they want to be.
Yeah, the different lessons.
Yeah.
Right.
So giving them choices, right?
Yeah.
Options.
Choices like dinner time, choices of what food you want to have to eat,
Yeah.
rather than just one selection of food. A choice of colour when they're colouring a picture.
Yeah. How about self-worth? How do we achieve that?
Encouraging them, training them.
Praise, yeah. And also giving them opportunities to succeed. When you give children tasks to do, activities, don't give them activities which are too hard for them to do, because if you give them too hard activities, they end up believing that they are incapable.
Achievable target.
Yes, something they can achieve. You can still stretch them, but you must give them activities you think, yes, I will stretch, these activities are going to stretch the children, however, they're not going to break them. Self-belief.
By listening to them and valuing their opinions, so for example in the fundamental British values, then you promoting that active communication, and everybody's got a belief and it's valuable to everybody within the practice.
Yes. Have you ever come across the looking glass self concept? What does it mean?
Is that like liking their self through looking at the self kind of thing? Like as if you're looking at the mirror, so liking what you see in the mirror kind of thing.
Right. Except in this case, the mirror is the society. So how society reacts to you teaches you a lot about yourself. So it's as if society is a mirror. Yeah, go on.
We did this with, we did with the Mandela shade
In Professor
Jahara, is it
the
Jahara
Jahara
window
window.
or whatever it's called, that thing, where the class had to write one word about every person, and then you had to write, you had to say whether you agreed with that and whether you saw that in yourself or not, and it was all about professional identity, wasn't it, and stuff like that, what we did for Shane.
Similar, right? Now, if say you come into this classroom, and therefore you go. Once you arrive, everyone packs their bag and they go. And people are reacting to you that way. You begin to believe certain things about yourself. For example, you think you are unlikable, right? So you are developing a sense of who you are through what you are seeing the society do, through the reaction of society to you. So your society, the society becomes a mirror of your sense of who you are.
So like the self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing?
Not exactly. It may lead to that, but not exactly that, right? This is where you are looking at society as the mirror, right? Am I a good person? Just like you when you stand in front of a mirror, and society reacts a certain way, and you think, okay, if the society reacts like this, therefore I am that. Okay? And so when it comes to children, how do you teach them to have a positive sense of self? How do you teach the rest of the kids to treat each other when it comes to the concept of looking at self?
Surely that could teach them like how to share, how to play with the friends, how to speak to the friends, how to treat the friends and the parents and
Yeah.
I'd say about being resilient.
I was going to say growth management.
Yeah.
To teach them to be resilient to certain things and to trust their own beliefs and be confident in themselves.
Yeah, don't always use society as your mirror. But sometimes how the society reacts to you is not an accurate representation of who you are, right? But that requires a lot of effort, I think. I think it's easier to deal with the group, to tell the group to actually accommodate the other child. But at the same time, yes, children who are kind of disaffected or alienated may actually become resilient as a result of that, but not all children, right? But resilience is an important aspect, especially when it comes to the sector, because children are at their core, according to many assumptions, they are very vulnerable, and you want them to develop into resilient individuals through a range of activities. Okay? Right. So things like who am I to me, who am I to others are important to children, right? And sometimes who am I to me may be contradicted by who am I to others, because others may actually treat me differently to how I feel about myself. Now when it comes to children, it may be actually a tricky situation. How do you deal with it? Okay? Interaction between who I am, what others think I am, what others want me to be, and who I am in the midst of others. Now this is very, very complex because people want you to be someone other than who you are, right? How do you react to that? How do children react to that from your experience of dealing with children? Have you seen children coming under peer pressure to behave a certain way just to fit in?
So recently my nephew actually came to my sister and said that I need to start, so he needs to learn how to fight to defend himself to the bullies that are hurting him. So he feels like he can't go to school now because he needs to fight like the others do. That's how he feels that he is to others, that he's his weak link.
Is it a positive outcome though?
Yeah, because the boys aren't at school anymore now, so only the boys go to school.
Would you encourage it?
No.
No, okay. Right, well, that's a good example, yeah? There's a lot of peer pressure that goes on in settings, especially when children are still growing up. Right, so we have key identity theories here. The first one is social identity theory. Now this one is interested in intergroup relations, right? How does this group of boys relate to this group of girls, right? How does this religion interact with other religions? Whichever groups you may have, you are interested specifically in group relations rather than individuals. That's social identity theory. And then next comes self-categorization theory, Tennant, 1987. Now this is a psychological approach, the self-concept, right? Where people or children are developing a self-concept, a concept of who they are, right? How do they categorize themselves as individuals rather than as a group? And then you have Simon's 2004 self-aspect model of identity. Now this looks at physical features like abilities, personality traits, ideologies, language, behavioral characteristics, social roles. I think the third one maybe is the most common one. What do you think? Which one do you think is the most commonly applied in everyday life among of those three?
Yeah, I'd say the last one.
The last one,
Yeah.
yeah?
And then the first one, and then the second one.
Okay. So you're saying number one is self-aspect model, right? It's the most common, followed by social identity, and then the last one, self-categorization. Okay. Anyone with a different opinion on that? Is it 3, 1, and 2?
I don't know, because if you don't have the second one,
Yeah.
how would you interact in groups if you don't know who you are
Yeah.
or how you want to behave? Then how do you transfer them behaviours into a group situation?
That's a good take on it. Yeah. Good analysis there. So group comes from individual.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when it comes to social sciences, as long as you can defend your position, both views are well defended, they're well supported, so both would be acceptable, right? Anything can be made true if verified. That's according to pragmatism. John Dewey. I don't know if I've told you about this guy. Okay? Now, it's all about, can you defend your position? Is it supportable with evidence, right? As long as it is supportable, you've made it true. Truth construction, we call it. Right, difference. What is it that makes you different? We've talked about that. How are you so sure that makes you different? We've talked about the first one, but how are you so sure what you've identified as a unique identifier of you makes you different? What makes you different? IT. What makes you different?
The way I look, how tall I am.
Are you the only person that is that tall?
No.
No. So does that make you different?
In this room, yeah.
Okay. Right. Now you're contextualizing. Brilliant. So context is important. Yeah. Excellent.
How you act.
How is it? So how are you so sure that makes you different? What makes you sure?
Why are you asking me all these questions?
Not just Kate. Right. What makes you so sure? What you think makes you different makes you different.
You can see it or you can hear it,
Okay. And why should we care about it?
because then it would be boring if everybody was the same.
Is that why we should care?
Yeah, you should be free to be who you are, yourself.
Okay. All right. Now, right, identity and difference are contrasting, but they are interrelated, right? You're looking at sameness, what makes you the same, and otherness, what makes someone an other, right? What makes you other than others?
Surely your views as well make you different from others.
Yeah, so your views project your beliefs,
Yeah.
your attitudes, your ideology, right? So difference in itself, you have a difference within self, the differences that occur within you, and then the difference from the other. Now this is quite complex, right? Because there are differences that are within you, right? What it is that is contrasting within you. We've talked about it earlier on when we talked about the multiple identities which are contrasting and sometimes at war with each other. Then you have variation. We may be affected by the same thing, but we are not affected the same way. That's one mistake that people make. You know, when we come up with policies, we are thinking, okay, just because children are affected by the same thing, therefore our solution must be the same. Now, what that presupposes is that these children, because they are affected by the same thing, it means that they are being affected the same way. Otherwise, you wouldn't come up with the same policy for everyone or same solutions for everyone. Now, this is important for your assignment as well, right? Do you think how your current issue is being dealt with makes an assumption that the solutions or strategies that are being used are fit for purpose for all contexts, for all settings, and for all children? Right? You're affected by the same thing, but it doesn't mean you're being affected the same way. Right? That's what we mean by implications for children and implications for practice. We must treat children as individuals. Remember, EYFS, LES Foundation Stage, and the theme of a unique child, right? The principle, a unique child. What it says is no two children are the same, okay? And if they're not the same, what it means is if we come up with strategies that are the same, that are standardized, they may work for some children and do not work for others. Why? Because children are being affected differently, even though they're being affected by the same thing. All right? And then diversity looks at differences among people, class, ethnicity, gender, etc. We talked about this earlier. There is a need for practitioners within our context, within our settings, within our sector, to understand each child, each family as unique. That's a good starting point. And when you've understood that, you want to try and respond to their unique needs, respond to their unique challenges, and try and find out what it is that will help alleviate the situation for them if they are facing difficulty as a result of the current issue you are looking at. Okay? Human attributes which make people different. Now, all this content is coming from Mayo and Law 2013. All right? We're okay to move on? Okay. 2013, yes. Now we come to diversity according to Banks' multicultural education model. That's another theory. Okay? Now, what Banks is saying is in order to appreciate, in order to sufficiently address or accommodate, to use a word that one of you used earlier on, in order to accommodate diversity and difference within the context of education and care, there are these 5 things you must do. The first one is content integration. What it means there is use diverse examples and content from diverse cultures, right? Try and use a range of cultures as your sources of examples. If you are going to have a website, because most settings nowadays have websites, make sure that your content reflects the diversity of children, at least in your setting. Don't draw examples from just one particular cultural background. When you're teaching, use examples that are applicable to a range of cultural backgrounds. Don't just draw from just one cultural background. So that's content integration. Whatever content is there, content you produce, the curriculum must contain the diversity. Knowledge construction is the other one. Raising awareness of how cultural assumptions influence bias in knowledge construction, right? So what you call knowledge, what you call important facts, right? Knowledge is culture-based. Knowledge is based on context. What's considered knowledge in one context may actually not be considered knowledge. Now, when it comes to that knowledge construction, what approach is your setting using? Is it just using one particular cultural background to construct what it is that children grow up calling knowledge, or are you using a range of backgrounds? And then the other aspect of model is prejudice reduction, i.e. identifying racial attitudes in children and attempting to modify them. Because children come with certain attitudes, right? Because they are their own persons. Remember, we said children are unique. But if you can identify any biases that children may have regarding prejudice, it's not just about race. Some children may actually have biases against gender issues, for example. Boys constructing girls in a negative light, or girls constructing boys in negative light. You have to identify any hints of prejudice that may be there in the children's attitudes, probably through their language, through their the way they play, the way they react and act. And then empowering school culture, examination of cultural bias and grouping and addressing it. So what we're saying there is, when you group children, what are your criteria of grouping? Are you grouping them in a certain way, or are you just leaving children to group themselves? There was a picture that was taken 2 or 3 years ago. England, I think under 21 team. The picture was taken of them in a gym, and then another picture was taken of them in a swimming pool. And one observation that was made by at least one newspaper was that every time those pictures were taken, the players, these are adults, under 21s, they're over 18, they were grouped by their race. It wasn't deliberate, it was just something that happened to have happened. We've seen it a lot, even in education context, when students come in to university for the first time, and they just sit in self-selected groups. A good number of times, if they are people from diverse backgrounds, a good number of times people sit according to their probably their religions or according to their race. It just happens like that. Not that people are willfully being discriminatory, but that is how it happens. Okay? Now, how are you going to group children to promote mixed? What approach would you use to group children? Randomly, yeah. Yeah? Just mix them all the time so children get familiar with and get used to different people all the time. It helps them adapt to different contexts and different people. And then there's what is known as equity pedagogy. Are you all familiar with the word pedagogy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What does it imply? What does it relate to?
Teaching.
Exactly. Well done. Now, modifying teaching to facilitate achievement across students from diverse racial, cultural, gender, and social class groups. That is equity pedagogy. But there are certain teaching methods which favor a certain group over another one. What you want to do is to try and have a balance so that everyone, regardless of their background, their gender, and so on, everyone has an equal opportunity to do well in, for example, exams, right? In your lesson. Right. Now, can you do this as your homework? How would you use Banks's model in your practice? Maybe more importantly, how are you going to use it in your current issue? Right? What are the strengths of this model? What are the limitations? And what are the recommendations for addressing the limitations? Okay? Okay, to move on. All right. Law and policy. policy. Now, this applies to England and Wales. Okay. Now, law is mostly in the context of this lesson. I know it means different things in different contexts. In the context of this lesson, we are going to take law to be something that is nationally applied, and policy to be context specific, settings specific. Okay. Now, key legislation relevant to equality and diversity. We have Equality Act, which we cited earlier, 2010. And in the Equality Act, you have 9 so-called protected characteristics, which you need to actually deconstruct and problematize. What are the strengths? What are the limitations of having just 9 protected characteristics? What are the implications for practice? Do you see those protected characteristics, or at least the content, applicable to your current issue for your assignment? Okay? And please note, we have our key stakeholders in the sector, the children, families, community, practitioners, and so on. All right? Key setting policies applicable to this are your equality policy, inclusion, anti-discriminatory policies. Now, they may come in different guises with different names, but every setting will have a policy that addresses the issue of equality and diversity. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Now, you need to identify these policies if you're going to refer to them in your essay. Identify them, describe them. What are the strengths? What are the limitations? Now, you must give examples when it comes to strengths, limitations. Give examples of, okay, this does not work. For example, in practice, it's not working effectively in this particular context, or it's not working effectively when it comes to children with this particular condition, and so on. And also, what you're interested in is what is the impact on children, families, practitioners, and settings. Again, we're talking about our stakeholders there. Okay. Okay. Now, we've looked at the policies of law, practice. What I'll ask you to do is your homework. Look at the application of what we've learned, right? What are the challenges? What are the implications of practice? What does it mean for practice, okay? And I want you to cover all these aspects as your homework. So all the slides that come in this section called practice, application, challenges, and implications, go and work on this particular section as part of your homework. And when we come back next week, that will be our starting point. We want to discuss what we've learned applies to practice. What is the impact on my practice? What is the impact on colleagues' practice? Both these particular aspects are covering the practitioner. What is the impact on working together? You're looking at multi-agency work. So don't forget all those concepts you learned in level 4 and level 5 that are applicable to your essay. Okay? Now, this is from Griffith. That's our conclusion. Remember, knowledge is constructed. So what we understand about equality and diversity is constructed, it is socially constructed. It's constructed through active participation. It's through how we live with each other, how we conduct each other, ourselves in the presence of each other, how we interact with each other. And knowledge is contextualized within society. That's number 3, in which forms of communication developed in the culture are encouraged and available and used to establish a community of learners. You can replace learners with community of children. Okay. So do you have any questions, folks? Any questions? Okay. Right, further reading, if you want to find out more on the topic, please familiarize with the last slide in this PowerPoint presentation. Okay. Right, this will go on YouTube today.